Usually when you hear the phrase artificial intelligence, there is this immediate expectation of something, well, totally weightless.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like pure magic.
Right. You imagine this invisible network of data just floating around in the cloud. It's silently writing code or generating images or, solving incredibly complex math problems out of thin air.
And it is a very comforting illusion. I mean, we literally call it the cloud, which sounds so incredibly light and ethereal. It makes the technology feel like it exists completely separate from our physical reality.
But the reality of this AI boom we are living through right now is the exact opposite of weightless. It is massively, almost incomprehensibly physical.
Yeah, we are talking about millions of tons of raw metal.
Entire gigawatts of electricity.
Exactly. And these wildly intricate liquid cooling systems moving across factory floors all over the globe. The virtual world that you interact with on your screen is entirely dependent on a very gritty, heavy physical world.
Because software, no matter how advanced it is, requires a physical box to live in.
Right, it has to live somewhere.
And that brings us to the core of today's analysis. We're going to unpack something called the Foxconn paradox.
It is a fascinating situation.
It really is. The goal for this analysis is to reveal who is actually capturing the real financial value of this global AI boom, and to explore why the physical builder of this new AI world is trapped in a totally different reality than the software giants.
And to really grasp this paradox, we first have to look at the jaw-dropping financial numbers.
Yeah.
Because they prove the physical AI boom is very real.
Yeah, and we need to look at how drastically Foxconn's entire business model has pivoted.
The pivot is, honestly, arguably the most dramatic part of this entire story. I mean, for decades, Foxconn's entire identity was tied to the smartphone cycle.
They were the invisible assembler, right, just operating in the background.
Exactly. Their fortunes were entirely dictated by consumer whims. They were just waiting to see if everyday people felt like upgrading their screens before the holiday shopping season kicked in.
They were completely at the mercy of whether someone wanted like a slightly better camera this year.
Yeah, but that model is practically vanishing now.
It's a totally new era. Now, nearly half of their first quarter revenue came strictly from their cloud and networking segment.
Which is a massive shift.
Huge. Their new buyers aren't everyday consumers standing in retail stores anymore. Their new buyers are the hyperscalers. We are talking about the absolute giants of the industry. Companies like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon.
And the thing you have to understand about those hyperscalers is that they operate on an entirely different plane than retail consumers. They do not buy on seasonal whims.
No, not at all.
They operate on rigid, multi-year, multi-billion-dollar capital expenditure roadmaps.
Because they are mapping out their physical needs years in advance.
Exactly, because they are absolutely terrified of losing the global compute race.
It is pure existential dread driving these purchases. If a cloud provider doesn't get their servers on time, they physically cannot launch their new AI services.
And the consequences of a delay for a hyperscaler are catastrophic. I mean, they would lose ground to their competitors that they might actually never get back.
So they are pouring unprecedented amounts of money into these rigid capacity forecasts. They're ensuring they have the physical hardware to back up their software ambitions.
And that sheer desperation is generating a massive revenue boom for the builders.
And the numbers here are just staggering. So in the second quarter, Foxconn's revenue hit 2.513 trillion new Taiwan dollars.
Which is a massive number.
Yeah, that translates to about 78.7 billion US dollars. That is a nearly 40% jump from the previous year.
Wow.
And if you isolate just one single month during that period, June, revenue spiked by an unbelievable 50%.
Now, on paper, a 50% revenue spike for a company already operating at that colossal scale, well, it looks like the ultimate victory lap.
It looks like they are printing money.
Right. The demand for AI hardware is surging, and Foxconn is catching a massive wave. But this is exactly where the paradox reveals itself.
Right. The revenue is getting significantly bigger, but the underlying business isn't necessarily getting better.
Exactly. You look at those massive top-line numbers, billions and billions of dollars pouring in, but then you dig into their first quarter margins, and they are absolutely brutal.
Yeah, let me read these. Gross margins were just 6.18%. Operating margins were 3.57%. And net margins were a razor-thin 2.36%.
To put that 3.57% operating margin into perspective for you, it means that for every $100 of that massive revenue boom that comes through the door, they keep almost nothing.
Right, after they pay for the raw materials, the factory upkeep, the electricity, and the labor.
Yeah, they are keeping less than $4 to run their business and reinvest.
And Wall Street is looking at that reality and actively punishing them for it. Foxconn shares have only gained about 4.3% this year.
Which is practically flat in this market.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Taiwan's broader market has surged by 61.5%. The market is completely ignoring the AI hype surrounding the top-line revenue and applying a severe contract manufacturing discount to their stock.
It is a harsh reality check.
But wait a second. I have to jump in here because the logic of this market reaction feels incredibly flawed to me.
How so?
Well, if Microsoft or Google are absolutely desperate for these machines, and Foxconn is essentially the only company on Earth with the capability to build them at this massive scale,
Mhm.
I mean, Foxconn holds all the cards.
You would think so, yeah.
Why on earth are they settling for a 3% operating margin? If they're capturing, 40% of the AI server market, why can't they just squeeze the hyperscalers and demand a 15% margin? They should have all the pricing power.
It is a totally rational question, and it points directly to the fundamental economic trap of physical assembly.
Okay, what is the trap?
The trap is that high component value does not equal high assembly margin. The chip designers and the software companies own the intellectual property.
Right.
An IP owner can design a groundbreaking chip, or they can write a revolutionary piece of code once, and then they can scale it millions of times at a near zero marginal cost. The hard work is entirely in the initial creation.
Ah, I see. But Foxconn's physical assembly cannot scale like code.
Exactly. The human labor on the floor, the massive footprint of the factory space, the immense electricity requirements, all of that scales linearly.
So if they want to build 10 times the servers, they literally need 10 times the space, 10 times the power, and 10 times the labor.
Yes, they are charging a fee for the heavy physical lifting, the intricate testing, and the massive logistics networks. They are not capturing the highly lucrative intelligence inside the machine.
They are simply the physical vessel for someone else's high-margin intellectual property.
Precisely. And when you compare their old business of building smartphones to this new AI demand, the scale of the physical challenge really comes into focus.
Yeah, the analogy they use here is great. Building smartphones at Foxconn's traditional scale was always like running a global fast food franchise.
Right. The goal is to make millions of identical, relatively small items perfectly and uniformly every single time.
But building a modern AI server rack, that is described as trying to mass-produce nuclear submarines on an assembly line.
I love that submarine analogy. It is perfect for understanding the extreme technical complexity we are talking about here.
Yeah, an AI rack is not just a standard metal box where you toss in a few circuit boards and snap it shut.
Not at all. It is a towering, tightly integrated industrial system. You are dealing with raw silicon that is incredibly fragile and cutting-edge high-bandwidth memory.
And just to clarify for you listening, high-bandwidth memory involves stacking microscopic memory chips on top of each other. It's like a tiny skyscraper, so the data can travel at lightning speed without any bottlenecks.
Yeah, and beyond that stacked memory, you have intricate network switches and literal miles of high-speed interconnects.
Miles of it inside the servers.
Yes, those interconnects are the physical cables and pathways that ensure thousands of different chips can talk to each other in perfect unison without even a microsecond of delay.
And the massive power delivery required to run all of this simultaneously generates an incomprehensible amount of heat.
So much heat.
They have to route liquid cooling systems directly to the chips themselves just to keep the metal from physically melting down under the electrical load.
And because of that, the tolerance for error is practically zero.
I can imagine.
The financial blast radius of a delay on the assembly line, or, a single water leak from that cooling system dripping onto a $1 million server rack, is catastrophic for everyone involved.
Honestly, I am struggling to see how they survive this dynamic. I mean, if the chip designers dictate the price of the components and the physical reality dictates the cost of the labor and the space, they're completely trapped in the middle.
It definitely looks that way.
Is there any strategic path forward for them to actually escape this trap and build a bull case?
There is a strategic path, and it actually relies on leveraging that exact extreme difficulty we just talked about.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. As the engineering gets harder, as they are forced to deal with advanced thermal dynamics and electrical complexity, the barrier to entry rises significantly.
Right, which naturally shakes out the weaker competitors in the manufacturing space.
Exactly. Not every contract manufacturer on Earth has the capability to ramp up tens of thousands of liquid-cooled units globally, practically overnight, just because a new chip architecture drops.
So the sheer difficulty weeds out the competition, which gives them slightly more leverage.
Yes. But there's more. They also point to vertical integration as their primary tool for capturing more margin internally.
How so?
Well, instead of paying third parties a premium to handle the complex diagnostics, Foxconn is building their own automated testing equipment.
Oh, I see. They're taking ownership of more of the internal integration process.
Right. By automating the testing and internalizing those highly complex steps, they keep more of the intrinsic value of every single unit.
So they don't have to outsource the verification of those intricate electrical signals. They can slowly inch those tiny 3% operating margins upward.
Exactly. The goal is to become more efficient at the underlying physical processes than anyone else in the world.
Okay, but there is a glaring contradiction happening at the exact same time. Foxconn is doing everything in its power to perfectly optimize its factories and centralize its efficiency, but the rules of global trade are completely fracturing.
Yeah, that is the big bear case here.
The shifting geopolitical landscape is threatening to crush those fragile margins all over again.
We are witnessing a massive geopolitical shift in how technology is regulated. Foxconn's historical efficiency always relied on a deeply centralized supply chain hub in Asia.
Right. Everything, the parts, the labor, the testing, it was all perfectly integrated in one geographical place.
But today, AI hardware is no longer treated as just ordinary commercial technology.
No, it is classified as strategic national infrastructure. We are talking about weaponry-level export controls, dictating exactly where these machines can be built, who can handle them, and where they can be shipped.
So the hyperscalers are demanding geographical resilience. They simply cannot risk having their entire future compute capacity locked in a single region that might face trade restrictions down the line.
Which means they're forcing Foxconn to actively expand capacity outside of that perfectly efficient Asian hub.
Exactly. Foxconn is having to build massive new facilities in India specifically for consumer goods, and entirely new facilities in Mexico and the US dedicated specifically to AI servers.
But hold on, duplicating a perfectly efficient hub into 3 separate countries completely destroys the central premise of their efficiency.
It really does.
How does building massive redundant factories in multiple time zones make any financial sense when you are already scraping by on a 3% margin? How is that profitable?
Well, the short answer is it doesn't make financial sense for the manufacturer. It forces Foxconn into what analysts call the working capital trap.
Okay, unpack that working capital trap for me.
Think about how the old centralized model worked. Foxconn could maintain one highly efficient warehouse of spare parts. Cash flowed efficiently because they only needed one backup for any given component.
Sure.
But in this new distributed supply chain, they cannot share that single warehouse across oceans.
Oh man, they literally have to buy triples of wildly expensive backup parts and automated testing equipment.
Yes, triples.
They need one complete set sitting in Asia,
Yeah.
one set sitting in Mexico, and one set sitting in the US.
And all of that highly specialized equipment just sits there gathering dust on shelves. It ties up hundreds of millions of dollars in cash flow just in case something breaks.
That is brutal.
They are spending massive amounts of capital just to maintain redundancy. Furthermore, they have to recruit and train entirely new labor pools in each location.
Right, dealing with varying levels of manufacturing experience and different local regulations, the coordination costs simply skyrocket.
It is incredibly capital intensive, and that brings us to a terrifying scenario for their balance sheet.
The bubble risk.
Yes. What happens if this frantic pace of hyperscaler spending simply normalizes?
Right now, everyone is buying every single AI server they can get their hands on.
But what if the cloud companies decide next year that they actually have enough servers for the time being?
If the hyperscalers decide they have sufficient capacity and tap the brakes on their capital expenditures, Foxconn is left holding the bag.
Completely. They would be carrying this massive, unavoidable physical burden.
They would have brand new, enormous factories in Mexico just sitting empty, burning through cash just to keep the lights on.
Yeah, eating completely through those tiny margins.
Well, the software companies can just walk away with zero physical overhead.
Exactly. The cloud companies get all the safety and security of geographical diversity, but Foxconn has to foot the actual bill for building that redundant infrastructure.
They take on the immense risk of navigating global geopolitics and managing millions of square feet of physical footprint, while the software giants continue to enjoy vastly superior economics.
It completely changes how you view the industry, doesn't it? The economic disparity between the companies designing the virtual future and the companies physically forging it is staggering.
It really reframes the whole picture. For you listening, think about your everyday experience with this technology. You might pay 20 bucks a month for a ChatGPT subscription, or, use a free image generator on your phone.
Right.
It feels like a simple, completely weightless software interaction.
Hmm.
But for that seamless interaction to even exist, companies like Foxconn are spending billions of dollars right now.
Tying up their cash flow.
Exactly, and building gritty, physical metal boxes across multiple continents.
So as you watch this AI boom unfold going forward, the key takeaway is to not get entirely distracted by the flashy software headlines. You have to look at the metal.
Look at the metal.
Watch Foxconn's upcoming earnings releases. Look closely at their gross margins to see if that strategy of vertical integration and automated testing is actually working.
Pay attention to their factory utilization rates and their regional costs. That will tell you if this physical AI economy is actually healthy and sustainable.
Because that physical infrastructure is the real machinery grinding away underneath all the hype.
It really is. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We spend so much of our time worrying about the existential limits of AI software.
We constantly debate whether code will eventually become sentient.
Right, or if these massive language models will eventually hit a reasoning plateau and stop getting smarter. But the ultimate ceiling on artificial intelligence won't be written in code at all.
No, it won't.
It will be forged in the hard, unyielding physical constraints of our world. What happens to the limitless virtual AI revolution when the physical world finally runs out of power grid capacity, shipping lanes, and literal factory floor space to sustain it?